Hey guys, tonight we're unraveling a story that's equal parts fragrant and baffling: how ancient Koreans made perfume from ducks. That's right, ducks. So imagine this: you're in a palace courtyard in medieval Korea, the moonlight pooling softly across tiled roofs, and somewhere in the distance, the quiet, confused quack of a waterfowl echoes. You're not dreaming, you're on a mission. A mission to make someone smell, vaguely like a spice rack wrapped in feathers. And honestly, you probably won't survive this if you think duck perfume is the weirdest thing you're going to hear tonight. Just wait. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing your sleepy corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin as a lowly court attendant in the kingdom of Goryeo, sometime in the 12th century. The palace is quiet, the air filled with wood smoke and dew, and a strange list of instructions has been tucked into your belt. Prepare the duck scent for Lady Yeonhwa. You sigh. Of course, another noble with sensitive opinions on how royalty should smell. There's no Febreze in this century. You turn on your heel and begin the long walk across the polished stone corridors to the inner storerooms, where a peculiar wooden box awaits. Inside are the tools for a ritual that is part chemistry set, part mystery novel, and part poultry appreciation club. The duck is waiting in the garden, because yes, that's the first step. The perfume starts not with oils or flowers, but with a very specific breed of domesticated duck, chosen for its clean scent profile. Historians still argue whether these birds were raised for aroma or simply happened to be the only ones nearby when someone got overly experimental in the bathhouse. You reach the aviary, where several ducks are sleeping peacefully under a straw canopy. One ruffles its feathers in irritation as you approach. You know better than to touch it now. The preparation requires the duck to be well-fed, well-rested, and oddly pampered. It's believed that diet played a role. Ducks fed a particular mix of grains and herbs were thought to imbibe those notes into their skin and feathers. A kind of scented osmosis, if you will. With gentle hands and a calming hum that probably does nothing but makes you feel more official, you slide the duck into a soft carrying basket and set off toward the preparation chamber. You try not to think about the last time someone tried to rush this step. The duck peed on the celadon jars. Nobody forgets that. The preparation room smells like a very confused kitchen. There are clay vessels bubbling over with concoctions that smell like cinnamon, ginger, lotus leaf. And something vaguely poultry adjacent. You place the duck in a cushioned enclosure and consult the scroll again. Feathers plucked during twilight hours only. Right, because obviously the time of day affects aroma. Ancient perfumers did not mess around. And here's the kicker. You don't need the whole duck. You need one feather. One. Plucked from the underwing. Not the tail, not the crown. The underwing. Why? Scholars remain divided. Some suggest it held the most oil-saturated fibers. Others believe it was simply a court trend started by a particularly bored noblewoman with a very strong opinion and very little science. With a breath, you pluck the feather carefully. The duck squints at you in mild betrayal. You apologize under your breath and place the feather into a dish filled with warmed sesame oil and ginseng root extract. The scent blooms slowly, earthy, nutty, slightly spicy, strangely pleasant. Somehow, duckless. You move next to the spice cabinet. This isn't your average pinch of cinnamon moment. You measure out slivers of aga wood, so expensive it's locked in a little iron box, dried plum blossom, powdered dried ginger root, and just a hint of musk scraped from the bark of a tree that only grows 3 months out of the year on one mountain no one wants to climb. Naturally. By now, the room smells like something between a gourmet dessert and a slightly overheated barn. You stir gently. The duck feather swirls like a sleepy swimmer in the center of it all. As you wait for the mixture to cool, your thoughts drift to how absurd this all must sound in hindsight. And yet, this wasn't strange. In fact, in Goryeo aristocracy, scent was seen as a marker of class. It wasn't about masking odor, it was about embodying harmony. Fragrance was moral. If you smelled good, surely you were good. Logical? Not really. Popular? Absolutely. One historical text from the time even describes a woman's scent lingering in a corridor for days after she passed. Highly suspicious. Highly poetic. Probably highly exaggerated, but memorable. You check your mixture. The feather is now fully saturated, darkened, curled slightly. Time to strain it. You pour the mixture through a silk cloth into a tiny celadon jar, delicately embossed with a peony motif. These jars are so thin, they hum when you tap them. You don't tap them, though. Not after what happened last time. The lid is sealed with wax. You affix a slip of paper with the perfumer's mark, a stylized duck foot. You carry the finished jar through the palace in silence, slipping past candlelit corridors and the occasional dozing guard. The scent still lingers in your sleeves, warm and faintly musky. You're not sure if it's the feather or the sesame oil, but you admit it's kind of nice. Kind of weird, but kind of nice. You reach Lady Yanhua's quarters and knock gently. A maid opens the door, nods at the jar, and takes it wordlessly. You bow and walk away. You hear a quiet, delighted gasp behind the door. You smile. Of course, no one outside the palace will ever know the recipe, or how many ducks it took, or how you spent your evening plucking feathers by candlelight like a very confused bird barber. But you'll know, and the ducks will remember. The night air tastes faintly of wood smoke and pine as you leave the noblewoman's chambers and slip into the outer gardens. But your work isn't done just yet. You've been tasked with fetching more ducks. Yes, more. Apparently one feather isn't quite enough to keep the court perfumed and content. It's not unusual. Ducks are gathered frequently in these parts. But tonight, you're to witness the collection yourself, from start to sleepy finish. You make your way toward the edge of the palace grounds, where a worn stone path disappears into reeds and shadows. Beyond it lies a village known not for its scholars or artisans, but for its unusually cooperative ducks. A prized trait, as you can imagine. The moon is low and round now, casting a soft silver wash over the landscape. The reeds whisper in the wind, and somewhere far off, a frog decides to announce its presence with more confidence than strictly necessary. You reach the edge of the duck village, more a cluster of homes with tidy thatched roofs and muddy ponds that double as social hubs for the fowl. You step around a sleeping dog, its belly rising and falling like a bellows. The duck catchers are already at work. They don't shout or chase. That would be pointless. These ducks are accustomed to people. Instead, the villagers walk slowly, baskets at their sides, murmuring softly as they coax the birds in. Some offer small handfuls of soaked rice. Others whistle a low, rhythmic tune that makes the ducks waddle over with suspicious curiosity. You squat beside an old man who holds a long, forked stick. Not for snaring, just for gently guiding. His basket is half full already. You have to think like a duck, he whispers, as if you've asked. Slow steps, eyes low, no sudden movements. And if you smell like lotus root, even better. You're not entirely sure if that last part is a joke or some form of rural wisdom. Either way, you sniff yourself. Unfortunately, no lotus. Historians still argue whether this method of nighttime duck catching was ceremonial or simply practical. Some scrolls describe it as a ritual cleansing, aligning the scent of the ducks with moon cycles and herbal calendars. Others suggest that, more realistically, it was just easier to catch them when they were sleepy and not particularly invested in escape. You carefully reach into the basket and stroke the back of a duck's head. Its feathers are downy, faintly oily. It doesn't seem to mind you, which is deeply flattering considering your earlier feather theft. Maybe word hasn't spread. You take a closer look at the birds. These aren't wild. They aren't quite domesticated either. They exist in a strange middle ground, half spirit animal, half ingredient. Ducks were often associated with beauty and grace in Goryeo art, and even featured in embroidered designs worn by court ladies. And now here they are, bundled up for scent harvesting. You help collect several more birds under the cool glow of the stars. There's a quiet rhythm to the work. Step, murmur, scoop. Basket. Step, murmur, scoop. It becomes almost meditative. A duck blinks up at you with mild interest. You nod back, like old friends who have decided to accept each other's roles in this strange, perfumed universe. Once the baskets are filled, the villagers tie cloth over the tops and stack them onto low wooden carts. You walk beside one, the wheels bumping softly over the packed earth road. The scent of feathers, pond water, and faint spice trails behind you. You pass a small shrine nestled under a pine tree, its candle still flickering in a stone lantern. You pause to bow, because that's what's done. No one's watching, but the ducks might be judging. By the time you return to the palace, the horizon has begun to stain with a dull pink. Morning is coming. You unload the baskets at the herbarium, a warm, steam-scented chamber filled with drying flowers, stacked oils, and scrolls pinned to wooden lattices. A sleepy apprentice nods at you and begins inspecting the ducks, one by one. You're dismissed with a wave. The ducks are in good hands now. You retreat to the side corridor and collapse onto a wide wooden bench. Your legs ache, your robe smells like pond, and your boots are definitely never going to be the same. But you've seen the ducks under moonlight. You've heard the soft cooing as they nestled into wicker baskets. You've watched a centuries-old process unfold as naturally as breath. And here's the funny part. No one outside of Korea will ever believe this. Tell someone you made perfume from duck feathers, and they'll think you've been hitting the rice wine too hard. Yet here, it's just part of the fabric of scent making. One fringe account from a traveling Mongol emissary even claims he witnessed a duck spa during a royal visit where ducks were massaged with herbal water before being patted dry with silk cloths. It sounds absurd, but honestly, after tonight, you don't rule anything out. As you finally doze off for a moment, head tilted back against a cool wooden beam. You dream of ducks gliding across silver lakes, leaving trails of spice and lotus in their wake. You wake to the sound of boiling water and the scent of roasted ginseng curling through the air. The palace is stirring now, servants padding softly down the corridors with trays of morning tea, scribes yawning as they carry bundles of ink-stained scrolls. But your path doesn't lead to tea or paper. No, your next stop is the bathhouse, where today's duck perfume blend is about to begin its transformation. The ducks from the night's collection are already in the chamber. It's warm here, humid, floral, slightly steamy from the giant copper kettles burbling in every corner. You shed your overcloak and approach the stone basin where the bathing takes place. The ducks are gently lowered into shallow tubs of water infused with crushed chrysanthemum petals, sweet flag root, and mulberry bark. It's not for hygiene, it's for scent infusion. As you lean closer, you notice the water shimmer, almost oily, like a broth of fragrance. One duck seems to be enjoying it a little too much, fluttering its wings lazily. You're oddly envious. A perfumer, a quiet, middle-aged woman with sleeves tied back, and a streak of lavender ash across her nose, beckons you to help. "One feather each," she murmurs. Same as before, but no shouting. These ducks are delicate. You comply, moving from tub to tub like a strange, soggy librarian, plucking a single underwing feather from each duck once it's finished bathing. The feathers are placed on a wide drying cloth, stretched taut over a bamboo frame, their damp fibers catching the morning light. They smell faintly floral now, with a hint of something savory. If scent had texture, these would be velvet. Historians still argue whether this feather-bathing process actually altered the final perfume or was simply symbolic, one of those ancient rituals performed so consistently it gained meaning over time. There are no exact measurements, no chemical charts, just feathers, water, and trust. You pass by one of the open jars nearby and peek inside. Inside is a paste-like blend of duck oil extract, dried persimmon rind, powdered deer antler, because why not, and a single peeled plum that's been fermented in honey for 2 weeks. It smells like something between incense and a strange jam your grandmother would insist is good for your spleen. You help the perfumer transfer the now dried feathers to the infusion pots. Broad, low clay bowls warmed gently over coals. Sesame oil is poured in first, then the dry ingredients. The feathers are last, stirred in slowly with a bent willow branch. The steam rising from the bowl is mesmerizing, smoky, sweet, and oddly clean. You inhale too deeply and immediately regret it. The musk hits your sinuses like a polite slap, and then like a magician unrolling a scroll. The perfumer produces the celadon molds. Ah yes, the containers. Because no perfume, duck-based or otherwise, is complete without an unnecessarily beautiful bottle. These are not just vessels. They're heirlooms, miniature sculptures in jade-toned porcelain. Some are shaped like lotus buds, others like tiny cranes mid-flight. All are blazed so finely you can see your reflection in them, albeit slightly distorted, like a sleepy dream. She shows you how to warm the mold slightly before filling. Keeps the oil from thickening too fast, she explains. And it sings to the mixture. You don't ask whether she means that literally. One of the jars does seem to hum faintly when set beside the coals. You ladle the liquid perfume, now steeped, strained, and cool, into each vessel. The scent is subtle, not overpowering like modern colognes, but quiet, layered, like someone telling you a secret through a paper wall. You wipe the rims clean and press a seal over the lid using softened beeswax. Each jar is labeled with a thin brushstroke of ink, indicating not a name, but a mood. Today's blend is called Evening Willow. Yesterday's was Crane Silence. You'll admit it's a better naming system than Eau de Duck No. 4. A scroll nearby outlines various scent moods and their intended uses. Lotus Wind is for morning. First Ember is for courting. River Sleep is for diplomatic visits. You can't help but wonder if some poor ambassador ever received the wrong blend and accidentally proposed marriage during a treaty negotiation. As you carry the finished jars to the cool chamber for storage, you pass a group of junior scribes gossiping in hushed tones. I heard the new blend includes 5 duck feathers, one whispers, and gold flakes. Impossible, another hisses. Gold ruins the balance. Historians still debate whether precious metals were ever added to perfumes. Some surviving jars do show microscopic traces, while others may have simply shimmered from mica dust or residue from the glaze. Either way, the myth of scented gold endures in old poems and bad court fanfiction. You place your jars carefully on the lowest shelf, beside older blends labeled with dates so old the ink has faded into dust. It's quiet here, inside the storeroom. You sit on a stool for a moment, letting the warmth and scent wrap around you. You think about the ducks, still drying off somewhere, probably preening and wondering if it was all a dream. You think about the absurdity of it all, and the precision, and the elegance hiding under the oddity. And you wonder, how many people today still walk past a lotus flower, inhale, and think, needs more duck. Outside, the sun has risen higher, casting golden slants of light through the lattice windows. You stretch your arms above your head and step into a side courtyard, where several palace servants are setting up a long, lacquered table, not for a feast, but for what might be the most peculiar part of the perfume process yet, the scent trials. Here's where things get truly experimental. You are about to witness the elite art of nose ranking. Yes, really, one by one. Members of the court's scent circle arrive. Scholars, artists, one suspiciously fashionable monk, all with the same solemn expression one might bring to a royal debate or a game of Go. They're known as the Hyungwon, or scent judges, and their noses are registered with the palace. Apparently, some people are just born with noses better than others. And if you're wondering how one gets that job, so are you. Each scent jar is unsealed under a tiny silk fan, and a folded sliver of paper, usually mulberry, is dipped inside. The Hyangwon take turns inhaling, each tilt of the wrist and furrow of the brow more dramatic than the last. You try not to laugh when one judge closes his eyes, breathes in deeply, and announces, "This smells like the 4th hour after rain on a willow bridge." Another nods solemnly. A third mutters, "Too forward, needs more ghost." No one explains what that means. Historians still argue whether these critiques had standardized meanings or were more interpretive. Some think the scent judges followed a coded language similar to tea ceremony vocabulary. Others suspect it was more about sounding profound than being precise. The surviving manuals are vague, often poetic, and wildly inconsistent. You're handed a sample to smell. It's subtle, warm, a touch smoky. Maybe sandalwood? Maybe pond? You nod and say something vague like, "Ah yes, a very introspective scent." One judge actually agrees with you. You feel absurdly proud. Each blend receives a score, not in numbers, but in syllables. A one-syllable response, like chalk, means excellent. A longer sound like could suggest overcomplexity. But beware the dreaded silence. That means the scent is forgettable. In this court, forgettable is worse than failure. Eventually, 2 scents emerge as favorites: evening willow and sea thread. The judges debate, huddle, sniff again, and finally select evening willow for this week's court application. You try not to smile too smugly. That one had your ladle work after all. Now comes the fun part. Application. You follow the procession to the women's quarters, where the high ladies are being readied. They sit like statues on tatami mats, backs impossibly straight, dressed in layers of pale silk. Their hair is being coiled into impossible shapes by a team of hairdressers who all look mildly panicked. One by one, the chosen perfume is applied, not dabbed, not sprayed, but fanned. Yes, the scent is waved through the air on slivers of silk that have been infused with the oil and then dried until crisp. The perfumers gently flap these scented silk leaves near the women's necklines, sleeves, and the hems of their gowns. It's mesmerizing. The silk flutters like moth wings, and the air ripples with fragrance. It's not just about smelling good, it's about presence, about occupying the air around you like a whisper. One fringe report from a Japanese envoy suggests that Goryeo noblewomen would spend hours walking through scent corridors, hallways infused with layers of perfume, so their clothes would absorb the blend from the atmosphere itself. Whether or not that's true, it certainly feels believable as you watch these women slowly rise, their gowns trailing faint wisps of evening willow behind them. Your attention shifts to a side alcove where the perfumer from earlier is preparing a scent sachet. These small silk pouches, no larger than a coin purse, are filled with a mix of dried feathers, spices, and powdered wood. They're sewn shut and worn beneath the robes, or tucked into sleeves, not for public display, but private reassurance. One sachet is handed to a lady who slips it gently into her sash. She smiles slightly, like someone carrying a secret. Smell is the closest sense to memory, the perfumer says softly. Sometimes you want to carry something that no one else can see. You find that oddly moving. Historians still debate the practical value of these scent sachets. Were they meant to mask body odor in days before daily baths? Possibly. Were they spiritual charms aligned with the elements? Could be. One court poem even suggests a sachet was once used to smuggle a love note across enemy lines. tucked beneath cinnamon and duck feather, hidden in plain scent. You follow the procession of high ladies as they drift toward the main hall for poetry readings and court performances. The scent lingers in the air like a story half told. You walk slower now, breathing it in, filing away details like a sleepy detective in silk shoes. One of the judges passes by and pats your shoulder. "Your blend has the soul of a dusk heron," he says. You resist the urge to respond with, "Thanks, I think." Eventually, the day begins to slide toward afternoon. Shadows stretch across the stones, and the excitement around the chosen perfume fades into the quiet background hum of palace life. You settle under a tree in the outer courtyard, leaning against its trunk, fingers still faintly oily from the morning's mixing. And just before you doze off, you realize something truly wild. None of this, not one drop of duck-scented labor, is considered extraordinary in your world. It's all just part of the quiet machinery that keeps the palace running and the court forever fragrant. You don't sleep long beneath that tree, just long enough for a sunbeam to inch across your foot and remind you that while court ladies waft through poetry readings, someone still has to clean out the distillation pods. That someone is you. Dragging yourself upright, you make your way back to the perfumery quarters, where yesterday's duck-fat-soaked utensils are waiting, like greasy, guilt-inducing ghosts. The air in this part of the compound is dense, still holding the afterglow of clove and myrrh. But beneath that, yes, there it is, the persistent scent of cooked bird oil. It's subtle, but it clings to everything. The bowls, the brushes, the walls, probably your soul. You tie up your sleeves and set to work. There's no glamorous artistry here, just elbow grease and hot water infused with ash soap and pine resin. The pine helps cut through the oil, and the ash, well, no one really knows. Some say it purifies, some say it's just what they've always done. Historians still argue whether these ancient cleaning methods actually sterilized anything, or simply scented the grime. As you scrub, your thoughts drift back to the ducks. How did this all even start? The oldest Goryeo records mention duck-based scents being used in royal ceremonies, but the recipes are vague, more poetry than chemistry. One ancient document refers to a blend that carried the whisper of lakeside mornings, made with the essence of waterfowl, which is either very specific or completely useless. What's more fascinating is that some of these perfumery practices may trace back even earlier, to the Silla Kingdom, or possibly even across the sea to Chinese or Southeast Asian traditions. There's even a legend that a Baekje princess brought a jar of feather oil as a wedding gift to Japan. Whether that's fact or just a fragrant bedtime story remains, well, debated. You rinse out the final bowl, your hands wrinkled and vaguely duck-scented. The perfumer pokes her head in to check your progress and rewards you with a plum candy. Small victories. Later that afternoon, you're summoned to a very different kind of perfume chamber. The archival room. This one is quiet, dusty. Less about making perfume, more about remembering it. You slip inside and immediately spot the wall of scrolls, each labeled with curious names. Moon Drizzle, Silent Carp, North Wind Memory. Each one a different blend, a different moment in olfactory history. It's like a scent library, and you're here to learn how to read it. The scrolls don't contain recipes in the modern sense. Instead, they weave ingredients into riddles and metaphors. Take this entry. To smell like the breath of reeds in morning, take the liver of morning geese and sleep it beneath acacia. What does that mean? Honestly, no one knows. This was perfumery as both science and art, or rather, perfume as vibe. The archivist, a sharp-eyed woman with fingers stained by old ink, explains that each blend was crafted for an emotional goal. It wasn't just about smelling good. It was about expressing a feeling, summoning a memory, or conveying a silent message. Duck fat wasn't chosen just for its texture or scent absorption. It was considered a symbol of liminality, a bird that moved through water, land, and sky. And in Goryeo philosophy, that meant something. You raise your eyebrows at this. The archivist shrugs, or, she says, maybe it was just really convenient fat. She shows you a collection of tiny ivory combs, once dipped in perfume and used to scent hair. One of them still carries the faintest hint of cassia and wild pear. You try to imagine the last person who used it, a young scholar maybe, or a concubine on the eve of the New Year festival. A fringe theory preserved in one of the scrolls suggests that certain blends were designed to be intentionally ephemeral, that they were meant to fade quickly, like cherry blossoms or polite compliments. Perfume wasn't supposed to last. It was supposed to vanish beautifully. You let your finger trace the edge of a faded scroll titled Duck and Fog. There's no explanation, just a list of strange ingredients: powdered magnolia root, fermented goose feather tips, burnt lemon peel, and whispers from a widow's gate. Again, no one knows if that last one was metaphorical, hopefully. Your guide to the scent library points out a rare entry, a blend reserved only for royal funerals. The ingredients include cold sesame, inkstone dust, and the first feather shed by a winter duck. It was designed to evoke silence, loss, and the final crossing, and it was burned rather than worn, added to incense censers during the long goodbye. You sit with that for a moment, realizing that perfume wasn't just a luxury here. It was language. Back in the main workshop, a commotion is brewing. One of the junior perfumers has spilled a jar of camphor into the cinnamon stock, and the resulting mixture smells like a ghost with a dental appointment. The perfumer in charge waves her arms and bellows something that roughly translates to, "You've created nose disaster." You slip out before you're roped into cleanup again. A day's waning now, and the palace begins to quiet once more. You return to your quarters, where your robe still holds the faint scent of the earlier blend. You exhale into the fabric and catch a whiff of something earthy and sweet. Duck oil and orchid root. Maybe a whisper of fennel. It's strange, isn't it? You've spent all day steeped in these smells, and you're still not sure whether you actually like any of them. But you've learned to listen to them, to notice, to name the shifting moods carried in air. You lie back on the wooden floor, letting the cool planks anchor you. Outside, a crane calls across the rice fields. Inside, a scroll flutters shut. You've earned your sleep tonight, little duck wrangler. You wake up to the low, rhythmic thunk of something being pounded outside. At first, you think it's a drum, or maybe someone smashing a melon. But no, it's mortar work. As you shuffle into the courtyard, you spot two palace aides standing over a heavy stone basin, grinding something dark and slightly sticky into a fine paste. You know that smell. Musk. Today, you're learning about one of the most potent and controversial ingredients in ancient Korean perfumery: animal musk. And this time, the duck gets a break. This musk didn't come from ducks, but from musk deer. Tiny, fanged, secretive creatures that roamed the mountainous fringes of the Korean peninsula, looking like someone tried to shrink a reindeer and accidentally added vampire teeth. Their musk glands, located awkwardly near the groin, were highly prized, painstakingly harvested, and once worth more than gold. You inch closer. The scent is overpowering, sharp, almost too real, like the inside of a cave after a thunderstorm. It's not pleasant, not exactly, but it's commanding. The senior perfumer nods approvingly. This, she says, is the base note that carries everything. Without it, your perfume is a dream with no bones. There's a pause as you process that image. Historians still argue whether musk was widely available in Goryeo or strictly limited to high aristocracy. Some documents suggest it was traded along the Silk Road, sometimes in powdered form, sometimes sealed in ceramic beads the size of a robin's egg. Others claim it was collected locally by specialized hunters, who operated more like shadowy musk ninjas, creeping through forests to collect glands from freshly expired deer. You're given a pinch of the musk paste to blend. It's mixed with a touch of duck fat, of course, and ambergris. Yes, that waxy substance sometimes found floating in the bellies of whales. Apparently, you're now working with two of the most bizarre animal products ever known to fragrance. Don't think about it too hard. You blend slowly, folding the mixture with a soft wooden paddle. This is no longer about just scent. It's about weight, memory, time. Musk is known to linger for days, sometimes even weeks, on fabric or skin. In ancient Goryeo, wearing it was a statement, like arriving at a gathering with a cloud of myth clinging to your sleeves. And not everyone loved that. There are surviving poems where courtiers grumble about the beast breath of overly perfumed sleeves. One nobleman even reportedly fainted during a royal banquet because the princess next to him had used too much musk oil on her hairpins. You can't tell if that's poetic exaggeration or just incredible drama. Later, you're sent to the storeroom to fetch more blending agents. This is not some quaint pantry, it's a labyrinth. Rows of tightly sealed clay pots, tiny drawers stuffed with powders that look like crushed gemstones, and bundles of dried herbs that could be anything from healing root to extreme laxative. There's a quiet reverence here, a sense that each ingredient is part of a secret vocabulary. You find a jar marked guancho, a rare aromatic moss that only grows in shadowed crevices on Mount Jirisan. A fringe theory claims it was once cultivated by monks who believed its smell brought prophetic dreams. Another source says it was just a byproduct of mildew scraped from temple roofs. Either way, it's now being added to your musk blend for depth. Back in the mixing hall, you learn about layering, a technique where multiple scents are timed to reveal themselves gradually. First, the top notes, fleeting, bright, attention-grabbing. Then, the heart notes, the real personality. And finally, the base, where musk lives, dark and slow and smoky. Your instructor compares it to storytelling. The opening grabs you, she says, but the ending decides if you remember it. By sunset, your new blend is ready for a test burn. Instead of fanning it on silk or brushing it on sleeves, this one will be released through incense, crumbled into a little cone and lit beneath a copper bowl. It's used to scent not people, but rooms. You sit on a cushion and watch the smoke curl upward. It smells surprising. Yes, it's musky, but there's also something soft beneath it, like pine needles crushed underfoot, like warm paper. It's oddly comforting, like the ghost of a campfire. A noble woman walks in, takes one breath, and says, "Ah." You finally captured the feeling of waiting for someone who never arrives. You're not sure if that's praise or a passive-aggressive burn. Either way, the perfumer grins and claps you on the shoulder. "Tomorrow," she says, "we teach you to make scent for armor." Wait, what? Apparently, in some Goryeo traditions, warriors, especially those of high rank, would perfume their armor before battle. Not for vanity, but for presence. The logic went something like this. If you're going to ride into combat, might as well do it smelling like immortality. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread practice or limited to ceremonial parades. Some say the scent was meant to honor ancestors. Others say it was a strategy to throw off enemy war dogs. One particularly spicy fringe theory suggests the perfume acted as a kind of olfactory signature, so that your body, if lost in battle, would be easier to identify. You lie awake that night thinking about that, about the strange ways humans have always tried to leave behind a trace of themselves, a smell, a softness, even in the middle of chaos. The moon is high. The scent of musk still clings to your sleeves. You turn over, breathe into the crook of your arm, and let the story settle over you. You wake to the clatter of lacquered trays and the unmistakable sound of two officials arguing about whether or not sandalwood counts as too foreign for palace rituals. It's early, and the morning air carries a mingled scent of roasted barley and something smokier, something metallic. Today, you remember, is the day you perfume armor. It's not every day you get to dab scented oil onto a helmet, The workshop has been rearranged to make room for racks of leather and iron, breastplates, gauntlets, and heavy cloth surcoats, still bearing the dents and sweat of previous use. You're struck by how human it all feels. These aren't polished ceremonial props. These are lived in. You run your hand along one shoulder guard and feel the imprint of a life spent bracing for arrows. Your task is simple and completely absurd. Make it smell less like death. The senior perfumer assigns you a blend known as Steel Wind. It's said to have been favored by General Kim Kyung-sun, the famed Goryeo military commander who once held off an invading force with only 300 troops. Whether he actually wore perfume on the battlefield? Historians still argue over that one. Some say it was applied to intimidate foes. Others claim it was purely ritual, part of the pre-battle purification rites. The ingredients list is brief but dramatic. Charred juniper bark, duck oil, of course, clove extract, and a trace of dried chrysanthemum petals. The idea is to combine the scent of earth and ash with something unexpectedly soft. Like a poem whispered before the charge. You grind the ingredients slowly, folding them into warmed duck fat until it becomes a glossy, grayish balm. Not beautiful exactly, but potent. When you rub a little onto a scrap of leather, it releases a fragrance that's sharp, worn, and slightly bitter, like the edge of a winter forest. An aide arrives carrying an actual suit of armor. It belonged to a retired general who now spends most of his time playing Wakey and telling increasingly impossible war stories. You're told he insists the armor be dignified in scent, whatever that means. You begin with the helmet. The iron is cold, pitted with age, and smells faintly of last season's rain. Using a soft brush, you apply the balm around the inner rim, then dab it at the creases where metal meets leather. The scent blooms faintly as your body heat activates it. You imagine the general striding into court with this strange perfume drifting around him, half battlefield, half funeral incense. As you work, a fellow apprentice tells you about an old superstition, that perfuming armor protected the wearer's soul from scattering in death. There's no written proof of that belief, just whispers and folktales. But it makes sense. In a culture where every gesture could mean something, why wouldn't scent be armor too? You move on to the breastplate. Its inner lining has been scrubbed clean but still bears the marks of sweat and soot. You add a second layer of balm, more generous this time, and the scent thickens, richer now. It feels like you're sealing history into the metal. In the next bay, someone is testing a rival blend. This one uses horse sweat, pine resin, and fermented ginger. The result? Not pleasant. You hear coughing, possibly weeping. There's a reason your blend was called Steel Wind, and theirs, less kindly, gets dubbed Barnstorm. To break up the monotony, your mentor shares a fringe theory that certain perfume recipes were secretly encoded with military intelligence. According to one speculative record, a blend labeled Night Garden was actually a signal to mobilize troops, with its ingredients matching the locations of rendezvous points. Historians scoff. Of course, but the archivist swears one scroll contains a scent formula shaped like a battle map. Battle map. You chuckle, half believing it. After all, why not? In this world, perfume isn't just beauty, it's strategy. You're nearly finished with the armor when a noblewoman enters the room, asking for a ceremonial breast wrap to be lightly scented for poetry. Naturally, she's handed a blend containing pear blossom, bamboo ash, and something called shadow breath, which you're fairly certain is just lavender someone renamed dramatically. Still, it smells divine. You wonder how much of this art is real chemistry and how much is story. By late afternoon, the perfumed armor is ready to be presented. It smells oddly elegant, like firewood and forgotten scrolls. The retired general arrives, squints at it, inhales, and grunts something that might be approval or indigestion. You take it as a win. Back in your quarters, you reflect on the surreal logic of the day. You've spent hours treating weapons of war like flower vases, and yet it feels right. As if scent has always been about transformation, turning sweat into ceremony, iron into memory. One of your roommates, a junior calligrapher who specializes in love letters, jokes that you should perfume his ink next. You both laugh, but then you think, why not? After dinner, fermented soybean stew and something vaguely fish adjacent, you head out to the garden. The night is cool, the air still holding on to a faint trace of clove and burnt juniper. You imagine yourself as a soldier, stepping into battle, carrying not just a sword but a story in scent. There's comfort in that, in knowing that even in war, someone once paused to rub balm onto a helmet. You lie back in the grass, the stars overhead flickering like scattered rice grains. The earth smells of dust and pine. A breeze picks up, and for a second, you catch a whiff of steel wind on your sleeve. It's haunting, and kind of wonderful. Morning arrives in layers of mist, and you wake to a strange, papery rustle overhead. It takes a moment before you realize it's not a bird or a ghostly messenger of scent, but pages. Hundreds of rice paper sheets strung from a drying rack above your mat. You forgot, of course. Today's lesson is on perfumed correspondence. Yes, letters that smell like heartbreak, longing, or, if you're feeling especially dramatic, bitterness brewed with plum. You follow the smell of ink and incense to the scriptorium, where scribes are hunched over scrolls, hair tied back with strips of silk soaked in pine and fennel. You're assigned to a perfumer named Unhua, a specialist in what she calls emotive ink scenting. She looks like she hasn't slept since the last dynasty, but has very strong opinions about how much sandalwood should go into a love letter. Spoiler, very little. She sits you down with a thin brush and a tiny glass dish. Write the phrase, "I wait beneath the plum tree." Then scent it with longing. You're not entirely sure what longing smells like. Unhua offers 3 options: dried figs steeped in rosewater, a dusting of powdered deer musk, or the resin scraped from the heartwood of a tree that only grows in remote Jala province and is harvested once every 7 years. Naturally, you choose that last one, mostly out of fear. The resin smells quiet, like distance, like faded silk stored in a wooden box. It's subtle, barely noticeable until the ink dries. But once it does, the words shimmer slightly, and the scent seems to rise from the page like a sigh. You learn that during the Goryeo period, scented correspondence was considered a high art. Courtiers might spend days composing a single note, not for the message itself, which was often vague and full of metaphors about birds and water, but for how it smelled when opened. A scroll scented with plum blossom and white musk might signal romantic interest. One soaked in clove and myrrh, regret. Historians still argue whether this code of perfumed letters was a universal practice or confined to select aristocratic circles. Some surviving records suggest entire affairs played out with no words at all, just scents, dabbed onto silk corners and exchanged under fans. Your second assignment is more ambitious. Create a scent for an anonymous poem to be delivered at the next lunar poetry contest. The theme is absence. You go through your new scent archive. Duck, of course, is not invited to this one, and begin blending. You settle on dried chrysanthemum, amber, and the faintest trace of burned paper. You test it on a scrap of calligraphy. The smell is beautiful and just a little sad, like a memory you forgot you had. There's a quick break for lunch. Barley tea and sweet rice cakes, but even the food tastes perfumes now. You're starting to smell in emotions. It's both thrilling and a little dangerous. In the afternoon, the master calligrapher enters, followed by 2 very nervous-looking messengers. They're carrying a letter from a provincial governor to his lover in the capital. Apparently, he wants to make a statement. You open the scroll and nearly recoil. The writing is aggressive, slashing. The man must have written this with a brush held in his fist. The scent he's requested: crushed pine, gunpowder, and a sensation of being watched. Not subtle. You and Inwa brainstorm and decide on pine sap, powdered pepper root, and a touch of camphor bark. The result smells oddly sharp, like a forest on edge, but it's compelling. You hope the recipient has a strong sense of humor and no allergies. By now, your fingertips are permanently stained with ink and resin. The air is heavy with every note imaginable. Floral, woody, herbal, bittersweet. One scribe faints. Another claims he can smell colors. As the sun begins to dip, you help prepare a ceremonial love letter. This one addressed to a noblewoman's late husband. She'll burn it tonight at his shrine, allowing the scent to carry her words to the next world. The blend includes lotus petals, old parchment, and a hint of sandalwood mixed with tears she brought in a small ceramic jar. Yes, actual tears. You don't ask how she collected them. You help fold the paper into a perfect crane, an old tradition said to help the message fly straighter into the spirit realm. Whether you believe it or not, the moment feels sacred. You place the paper bird on a tray, light the incense beside it, and watch the edges curl upward as the scent rises like a prayer. That night, back in your room, you find a scroll tucked under your mat. Someone's playing a game. It's unsigned, the message short. Some things don't need to be remembered to be true. The scent, osmanthus and powdered rice, delicate, faintly honeyed. You smile and lie back. The sky beyond the window is painted with stars. Somewhere, a brush dips into ink, and a scroll is rolled tight, sealed with a string scented like longing. You exhale slowly, surrounded by layers of smell, story, and silence. A day begins, as all great perfuming days should, with fermented bird intestines. You blink twice at the small ceramic bowl sitting on your workbench. It's brown, it's jiggling, it smells ambitious. Someone in the workshop mutters that this is the ancient formula for Oji Hang, a gut-based scent enhancer reportedly used in only the most elite of court perfumes. Whether that's true is debated, of course. Historians still argue if the infamous Empress's breath, perfume, used during late Silla and early Goryeo dynasties, actually included fermented internal organs, or if that rumor was started by rivals. Either way, today's blend is not for the faint of heart or the sensitive of nose. Your assignment: reconstruct this ancient scent based on a half-burnt recipe scroll found in a collapsed garden pagoda last month. It includes such charming ingredients as musk, fermented duck liver oil, dried ginseng root, clove, and a few unstated spiritual essences, which, let's be honest, probably means whatever smelled strong and was lying around. You begin with the ginseng, aged, bitter, and stringy. Ground finely, it adds a medicinal warmth, sharp and earthy. Then comes the clove, like biting into a spicy secret. The musk follows, pungent but oddly comforting, like a very clean yet arrogant deer. Finally, the fermented duck liver. It resists being spooned into the mixture, as if aware of its own horror. You coax it gently. It flops in with a sound you'll never forget. The result is complicated. You test a dab on a thin strip of woven hemp cloth and wave it tentatively. A few nearby perfumers pretend not to gag. One older artisan smiles faintly and says, "Smells like royal taxes." The scent, you admit, does have layers. First, it hits sharp and sour, like betrayal. Then it softens into something unexpectedly warm, like candle smoke at the end of a ritual. There's a trace of sweetness hidden beneath it all, like buried memory. The original scroll suggests this perfume was reserved for spiritual ceremonies, specifically, ones intended to purify palace grounds or bless new architectural projects. You're skeptical. Why would you bless a new floor with something that smells like regret and liver paste? But then again, purification isn't always about flowers. Sometimes you burn out the old ghosts with something that stings. You're pulled away by a senior official carrying a collection of ancient hair combs. These, he says, placing them in your hands, need to smell like someone powerful just left the room. No pressure. The combs belong to an aristocratic widow who, according to legend, once refused 5 marriage proposals, outdueled a court poet in a syllable contest, and smelled consistently like redwood bark and intimidation. You study the combs, lacquered wood, inlaid with mother of pearl. Each has faint traces of past perfumes embedded in the teeth. You scrape a little of the residue and warm it over steam. The scent that releases is woodsy, dry, and just a little smoky. You reconstruct the blend using red cedar shavings, a drop of goose fat, and finely powdered iron-rich soil taken from the North Hills. Surprisingly, it works. The combs now give off an aura that suggests quiet dominance and well-organized teacup words. While you're applying the blend, your mentor tells you a curious story. Apparently, during the reign of King Munjong, a group of palace spies used perfume as part of their disguise kits. The trick was this: most courtiers wore distinctive scents, so spies would apply the same blends to blend in during secret missions. One popular disguise scent? A mixture of persimmon leaf, fishbone ash, and sun-dried melon skin. Smelled awful, but everyone thought it was trendy. Some historians say these scents helped mask more than identity. They were also coded signals, like if someone smelled like melon, they were carrying a message. If they wore the scent of foxglove, it meant danger. Again, no records confirm this, but the idea is romantic. In a shadowy espionage meets perfumery way, you take a break and step into the garden for air, carrying a tiny scroll dipped in today's experimental blend. You unroll it and inhale. Still too sour. You add a pinch of powdered mint, just to cut the acidity, and test again. Better. Still strong, but now with a top note of something almost hopeful. A page boy passes by, wrinkling his nose. Smells like someone's apology failed, he mutters. You'll take it. In the late afternoon, a traveling merchant arrives, bearing a new mystery. A small wooden box filled with round perfume stones, hard, dark, and intricately etched. He claims they came from a southern island where monks once sealed prayers into scented resin. Whether that's true or he just overcharged some noblewoman last week is unclear. You warm one of the stones in your hand. It releases a dense, layered aroma of myrrh, black tea, and what can only be described as the smell of an unread book. It's beautiful, deep, a little sad. You wonder what prayer it carries. As night falls, you bottle the day's experiments, some successful, others to be quietly buried in the compost pile. You label each with poetic names: Wind Over Old Armor, Silent Widow, 5 Steps from Plum, and Duck Regret Do Not Reproduce. Your hands are stained with herbs and soot, your robe streaked with resin. But your nose feels sharper than ever, attuned not just to ingredients, but to emotions wrapped in vapor. Before sleep, you light a single incense stick, using your newest blend. It smells like earth after rain, like a letter left unread, like memory softened by time. And that smells like progress. Your dreams are filled with strange arenas, flowers blooming underwater, smoke rising from ivory towers, a duck whispering something about saffron and shame. You wake unsure if your room actually smells like that, or if your nose has simply developed sentience overnight. Today, you're summoned not to the perfumery, but to the royal kitchen. Yes, the kitchen. This is where the perfuming world intersects with food. Not in taste exactly, but in ceremonial scenting. Ancient Korean royal banquets weren't just about flavor. They were orchestrated sensory performances, and yes, that included perfume. The idea was simple: scent the air, not the dish. If you're smelling jasmine as you bite into sweet rice dumplings, the whole thing feels far more divine. You arrive to find a long, lacquered table covered in scrolls, steamers, and very nervous kitchen staff. A celebration is approaching. Someone's wedding, someone's promotion, someone's third lucky baby. And you've been asked to prepare the scented ambiance. No pressure. Your first task: craft a background scent for a ceremonial rice cake course. The goal? Make guests feel comforted, nostalgic, but also slightly impressed with themselves. You ponder. You blend. In goes a base of roasted barley straw, soft, earthy, a little smoky. Add powdered magnolia petals for a subtle floral lift. And because you're feeling cheeky, a few drops of boiled pearskin essence. It smells like autumn on purpose. The result is warm and mellow, like walking past your childhood home, but pretending not to care. As you diffuse it over hot coals behind the serving dais, the cook gives a small nod. Smells like a good memory that forgot to be sad. You'll take that as a win. Next comes a trickier request. Scent the soup course with an aroma that complements beef broth but doesn't overpower it. This is a minefield. You consult an old palace ledger that suggests lotus root mist or aged pine infusion. You choose the latter. You simmer dried pine needles in wine and let the steam rise beside the broth. It works, barely. The beef smells fuller, deeper, but not heavier. A foot soldier of scent, not a general. One of the scholars watching mentions how, during the Joseon period, scenting food air was considered a political act. Too much perfume at the banquet? You're vain. Too little? You're austere. The right amount? You understand balance, and therefore, can probably rule a province. Historians still debate whether some kings deliberately over-scented their feasts to unsettle guests. Later in the day, you're handed a bowl of sliced pears and asked to prepare the perfumed interlude, a moment in the meal where guests pause, inhale something subtle, and reset their palates. You spritz a mist made from persimmon vinegar and dried chrysanthemum. It fizzes slightly on the fruit's surface and releases a scent like crisp morning air through paper doors. It's oddly satisfying watching people close their eyes mid-bite, like the smell triggered something ancient. While the guests are distracted, you sneak off to the back storeroom, rumored to house old perfuming relics. Inside, it's cooler, darker, and lined with clay pots sealed in wax. You find one labeled in scratchy brushwork, "Whispers before salt." You crack the seal. The scent hits immediately. Salt air, old wood, sun-warmed seaweed. It's the smell of a port city right before a monsoon. Who bottled this, and why? One note inside reads, "For voyages never taken." You pocket a drop on your sleeve for later. The final task of the day, scent the final tea course. This is high stakes. People will remember this. The goal is calm, closure, maybe a tiny hint of enlightenment. You create a blend of roasted grain, lemon leaf, and the faintest smoke from burned silk ribbon. When released over the table, it drifts like a sigh. One guest stares at the air and says, "Did anyone else just remember someone they haven't met yet?" You're not sure what that means, but it feels like success. As the banquet ends and the guests disperse, you help the kitchen staff gather leftovers and quietly reseal the scent jars. One servant leans close and whispers, "Did you use the duck thing again?" You shake your head. Never again. Walking home through the palace garden, you pass under a row of blossoming trees early for the season. The air is heavy with natural perfume. No resin, no powder, no heated stones. Just earth, rain, and time doing what they do best. And for once, you leave your hands unscented. You wake with a lingering sense of accomplishment and the faintest aroma of pear vinegar still clinging to your sleeve. Today, however, you're not scenting meals or fiddling with fermented duck regrets. No, today you're being loaned out, temporarily, and somewhat reluctantly, to the Royal Theatre Troupe. Why? Because someone decided the upcoming court drama needs atmospheric perfume. That's right. The actors want you to scent their scenes, not the costumes, not the stage. The air. The director, a very dramatic man named Hojin with a shaved head and elaborate silk robes, greets you with a deep sigh. "I want the audience to smell heartbreak," he declares, before the lovers even speak. You nod slowly. "You want heartbreak to have a bass note?" "Yes," he says, "but with longing. No pressure." The play is set during the Silla dynasty and tells the story of two lovers separated by a rival clan, fate, and a very judgmental parrot. You're assigned to create 5 distinct ambient scents, one for each act, that match the rising emotional arc. You begin with Act 1, First Meeting. Here, the lovers catch sight of each other in a plum orchard. You go literal. Crushed plum blossom, a hint of rainwater, and a thread of young pine. It smells like something just beginning. With a little hesitation, the actors rehearse. The scent wafts softly across the front row. Someone sighs audibly. Hojin beams. Act 2 is trickier. Secret letters in the moonlight. You think about loneliness and ink. You blend powdered ash bark, faded jasmine, and a drop of aged soot from a temple brazier. The smell is soft, but it lingers like a poem scribbled in the dark. One of the actors says it makes her feel like she's waiting for something that won't arrive. Perfect. Act 3 is the turning point. Discovery and betrayal. You need a scent that cuts. You reach for wormwood, dried lemon peel, and singed sandalwood. When warmed, it smells dry, bitter, almost metallic. One member of the troupe mutters, "Smells like regret and wet paper." Hojin nearly weeps with joy. Historians still argue whether ancient Korean theater actually used scent in any formal way. There are references to incense being burned during court performances, but some believe those were for spiritual cleansing, not narrative effect. Either way, you're inventing something beautifully unnecessary. Act 4, Flight and Separation. This one breaks your heart a little. You create a blend with wind-dried rose petals, cold tea, and old hemp rope. There's a slight ache to it. It doesn't smell sad exactly. It smells tired of being sad. When the scene ends, everyone is silent for a long time. The final act, death and reunion in spirit. You pause here. How do you bottle the smell of peace and longing all in one? You reach into your satchel and pull out the tiny cloth scrap you dabbed with whispers before salt. That port city scent, the one that smelled like voyages not taken. You warm it gently with a piece of coal. It unfurls into the air like fog on the sea. Salt, wind, and time. It smells like letting go. When the curtain falls, even Hojin is quiet. "That," he says, blinking. "That was almost too much." You bow slightly. That means it worked. After the rehearsal, you linger with the actors over tea. They ask about your tools, your techniques. One younger performer says she wants to learn how to make a perfume that smells like laughter. You tell her to start with roasted barley and honey, then wait for a memory to guide her. The troupe gives you a gift before you leave, a tiny clay bottle shaped like a lotus bud. Inside is a homemade blend, lemongrass, wax, and dried cherry bark. For clarity, they say. You tuck it into your robe. As night falls, you walk past the empty stage. It still smells faintly of rose and tea, betrayal and salt. Perfume has become part of the play, like a hidden script only your nose can read. And for once, the idea of scent feels bigger than vanity, bigger than court ritual. It feels like storytelling, the kind that doesn't need to be seen or heard, only inhaled. Before bed, you light a sliver of sandalwood and close your eyes. Your room fills with the quiet after applause, and outside, the wind smells just a little bit like Act 4. You drift into dreams half full of theater fog and the scent of invisible heartbreak. By the time you stir again, the stage is gone, but the memory of salted wind still clings to your senses. Today, your orders are usual. You're being summoned to the Royal Archives. A scholar has requested your help with a very old, very confusing manuscript. One filled with cryptic notes on extinct perfuming recipes. You're not entirely sure how you became the person people call for that, but you suppose Duck Perfume has a way of branding a person. The archives are colder than you expect. Dusty, stone-walled, full of creaking shelves and scrolls that feel like they're judging you. The head archivist, a hunched woman named Yeonsu, slides a scroll across the table and whispers, "It's from the Goryeo dynasty. We think it's a perfumer's journal, or a coded menu." You unroll it carefully. The parchment is cracked with age, the ink browned like overbaked sesame. And sure enough, the writing is odd. Phrases like, "One breath of golden bark, stir before dawn, do not awaken the swan while blending. Only use amber tears if the moon is shrouded." So either the perfumer was a genius or deeply sleep-deprived. You spend the next few hours translating with Yeonsu's help. Turns out, it's mostly about a set of royal perfumes called the seasonal veils. 4 blends meant to represent the emotions of each season, used during high rituals and changes of court. You're entranced. Spring's veil, made from peach blossom ash, young mugwort, and fermented silk threads, said to provoke awakening and gentle rebellion. Summer's veil, dried lotus, bamboo char, and a hint of crushed beetle shell, for clarity under pressure. Autumn's veil, powdered chestnut skin, inked mulberry leaves, and old cinnamon bark, to honor endings. Winter's veil, pine smoke, black sesame oil, and a single drop of deer musk, to protect what sleeps. Historians still argue whether these veils were ever actually used or simply poetic inventions in court literature. Some believe they were metaphorical, a way to write about emotions too taboo to express directly. But the ingredients are too specific, too odd to be invented whole cloth. You decide to try recreating Spring's veil, just to see. You sneak out of the archives with a copy of the recipe and spend the evening tracking down the ingredients. Mugwort you can find easily enough. Peach blossom ash? That takes some creativity. You dry the petals over charcoal and grind them to dust. The fermented silk thread, though, that's a challenge. Eventually, you locate a forgotten strip of silk hidden in a cedar-lined trunk, half-molded and soaked with the scent of thyme. You cut a sliver, steep it in rice vinegar, and dry it in moonlight. Because why not? The final blend smells nothing like what you expected. It's soft, warm, faintly bitter, like waking up in a room you don't recognize but somehow feel safe in. You dab a little onto your sleeve and suddenly remember a friend from childhood, though you can't recall their name. You decide not to ask questions. Later, you return to the archive and tell Yansu. She lights up. So it was real, she murmurs, more to herself than to you. And then she shows you something even stranger. A second scroll, this one much newer, labeled simply Unveiled Seasons. It seems someone in the late Joseon period tried to reverse engineer the seasonal veils, only to find they worked better when incomplete. The more accurate the formula, the less evocative the scent. The nose, they wrote, prefers mystery. That tracks. You realize you've spent the day not just replicating history, but participating in its ongoing perfume-based inside joke. You feel oddly honored. Before leaving, Yansu hands you a worn amulet filled with dried herbs. Found it in a scholar's pocket. Smells like ambition. Thought you'd appreciate it. You do. As you walk back through the palace, night falling like thick silk, you pass a group of students rehearsing poetry under the trees. Their voices rise and fall like waves. You pause, breathe in the cool air, and realize the season has started to turn. There's a different scent on the breeze now. Less blossom, more bark. You smile. Spring's veil has done its job. By morning, your room smells like a blend of moldy silk, crushed bark, and questionable ambition. It's not unpleasant, just complex. You suppose that's how all the best stories smell. Today, you're heading beyond the palace walls, summoned by a noble family with a very private request. Their matriarch, Lady Namgyeon, is nearing her 80th birthday. She can no longer travel, no longer attend ceremonies, but she misses the temple rituals of her youth. So, they ask you to create a scent that can simulate that experience, a kind of portable memory. You arrive at their estate, tucked at the edge of a pine forest. It's quiet here, the kind of place where even the birds whisper. Lady Namgyeong is waiting, seated in a reclining chair wrapped in silk blankets. Her eyes are sharp. Her voice is thin but unflinching. "I want to smell the mountain," she says. "The one behind Gyeonggisa Temple. Early spring, after the first rain. That's not just perfume. That's time travel." You start with the obvious, pine needles. But fresh ones, not dried. Those smell too sharp. You have to steam them gently to release the deeper resin. Then you add soaked soil. Real soil, harvested from the shade where moss grows. The family's gardener looks slightly alarmed when you begin scraping moss off stones. "Is this normal perfuming?" he asks. Nothing about this is normal, you reply, shoving mud into a tiny pot like it's sacred. You grind old sandalwood into powder, using an antique mortar until your arms ache. You boil it in barley water to create a kind of vaporous base. You need depth, not spice. Next, a touch of dried magnolia bark. It gives a bittersweet note, reminds you of walking barefoot after a storm. To top it off, a few strands of old temple incense, crumbled like ash into the mix. You heat the blend on a smooth ceramic plate. The scent rises slowly. Lady Namgyong closes her eyes. For a long moment, she says nothing. Then she murmurs, "There was a bell, somewhere behind the trees. That's what this smells like." You don't know how to respond to that, so you bow, deeply. The family asks if the perfume can be bottled. You shake your head. Only works when warmed. It's shy. They ask you to leave a jar anyway, for when she forgets where she is. Later that day, you sit in the family's courtyard and sip barley tea, watching a servant carefully tuck your perfume jar into a drawer beside prayer beads and folded letters. You feel the weight of what scent can hold. Grief, memory, longing, even location. It's like your blends have stopped being products and started becoming messages in invisible ink. Historians still argue whether ancient Koreans ever used scent for therapeutic memory. There's no solid evidence of aromatherapy in the modern sense, but scrolls do mention wind for sorrow or rain-scented peace in relation to court rituals. Whether literal or metaphor, the nose remembers what the mind lets go. On your way back to the palace, a young monk stops you on the road. "You smell like bark and regrets," he says, kindly. "Are you a healer?" You smile and say, "I make perfume." "Same thing," he replies and walks on. That evening, you sit in your room with your nose stuffed in a clay jar full of warm resin and memories. You wonder what scent you'd ask for if you were 80 and wrapped in silk blankets. Probably roasted sesame and the smell of ink drying on old paper. Something humble. Outside your window, the wind shifts, and for a brief moment, you smell that bell in the forest too. You have no idea how. But some part of you, the part that's been working with ducks and dirt and smoke and silk for weeks now, nods and understands. You're beginning to lose track of how long you've been here. Days blur into each other, each one scented slightly differently. Pine sap and bitter plum. Temple smoke and sweat from boiling herbs. Even a lingering whiff of fermented duck. Yes, it still haunts you. But today, something different arrives. A letter. Hand-delivered by a eunuch with no name and even less patience. He simply bows, waits for you to read it, then disappears like smoke. The letter is from the Royal Council of Ritual Affairs, which sounds important because it is. They've requested your presence for a classified assignment. You're to bring your tools, wear clean robes, and tell no one. Naturally, you immediately tell your favorite kitchen boy. "If I vanish," you say, "assume it was either poison or sandalwood overdose." He shrugs. So, a normal Tuesday. You walk the long path toward the restricted garden compound. It's quiet. Birds fly low, and even the crickets seem to hush. Inside the stone gate, you're greeted by Minister Bach, a tall, serious man who looks like he hasn't laughed since the plum tree bloomed crooked in 1764. He explains that you've been called in to help with the royal tomb preparation, not for a current funeral, but for a future one. Specifically, the king's own scent legacy. Apparently, a centuries-old tradition, rumored, never confirmed, dictates that the monarch's tomb chamber should carry a unique perfume, one that reflects their reign, personality, and even their flaws. The king has decided to commission his in advance. "While my nose still functions," he reportedly quipped. You're led into a sealed chamber, filled with scrolls of past rulers' burial blends. The names are poetic, dramatic, and slightly absurd. Fog over ambition, regret beneath plumwood victory, bitter and cold laughing tiger ash. Each was made once, then locked away forever. You study the king's personal history. He was a reformer, beloved by commoners, hated by the aristocracy, and a known lover of fermented rice sweets. His reign has been long and occasionally baffling. So what does that smell like? You start blending. You choose green barley straw as a base for its earthy, stable character. Then charred pear wood to reflect hard decisions made in fire. You grind in a dried persimmon from the palace orchard, which he planted in his youth. The sweetness is subtle but present. Then a pinch of tiger balm residue. Symbolic, not literal. You melt it into wax and let the sharpness fade just enough. It leaves a sting in the nose that makes your eyes water a little, but it passes quickly, like most bad policies. Finally, a trace of salted soy paper aged in plum wine. It gives a fermented, complex aroma. A little odd, a little wise. The scent is balanced, strange, warm, and slightly unsettling. You bottle it and label it in plain script, legacy in waiting. The council inspects it. One man coughs, another wipes his eyes. Minister Bach simply nods. The bottle is sealed in a lead case, wrapped in silk, and buried in the ritual garden's deepest chamber. You're sworn to silence. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, they give you a fruit basket as payment. As you walk home munching on overripe jujubes, you feel strangely content. You've bottled a king's lifetime, not for glory, not even for display, just for when he's gone. Historians still argue whether any real tombs were ever scented. Some records say yes, others dismiss it as romanticized folklore. One scholar insists tomb fragrance was symbolic, like how tomb murals showed painted food instead of actual offerings. But you're starting to suspect the ancients were weirder and more poetic than modern minds allow. That night, you light a bit of pearwood bark and watch the smoke curl toward the rafters. It smells faintly like a kingdom you can't quite remember visiting. You lie back, arms folded behind your head, wondering what scent they'll bottle for you one day. Hopefully something with mint, or maybe rice crackers. Definitely not duck. The morning creeps in soft and slow, as if it knows this is the last chapter of something. The air outside your chambers smells faintly of sun-warmed rice paper and damp stone, almost like the world itself is exhaling after holding its breath too long. Today, you've decided to take a break from the palace. You walk down from the perfumer's wing, through the servants' corridors, past the courtyard where the laundry flaps like sleepy sails, past the kitchens where soybean paste bubbles in great crocks and someone burns the morning stew again. You're heading to the village outside the city wall. It's market day, and you want to find scent outside of the scholar halls and royal expectations. Something simple, something honest. You carry no satchels, no scrolls, no glassware, just your nose and a small notebook made from pressed lotus pulp. At the edge of the market, smells come at you in waves. Fried dough, heavy with sesame oil, dried fish stalls that could knock over a cow, sizzling garlic, soft plum jam cooking over open flame. You wander past clay jars filled with sweet pickled garlic, cinnamon candies, and flower honey harvested from rooftop hives. And then, something strange. A vendor offering bundles of scented talismans. See, it's musty, like an attic full of borrowed coats, but oddly comforty. The old woman smiles. Smells like memory, doesn't it? You nod. She points at a different pouch. That one's for heartbreak. Burn it slow. You don't ask questions, a yo. As you walk the market, you begin to realize just how many Eve. Hiss the beastie the SYH. You open it. It smells like sweet soy and burnt bark. Po by mem yo. Just the way magnolia smells after rain. The sting of vinegar on raw skin. The shock of peppermint in cold wind. You start cataloging yo. You're tired now. But not the kind of tired that sleep can cure. The kind of tired that comes after you've quietly participated in something larger than yourself. You lie back in the grass, notebook resting on your chest. The wind is mild, carrying the earthy trace of pine needles and damp paper. They faded into the background, like all powerful scents eventually do. All that remains now is the story they helped tell. You smile. and breathe in. The world grows quieter now. You're still lying there beneath the ginkgo tree, the shadows stretched long and gentle across the courtyard stones. Somewhere nearby, someone is sweeping with a straw broom. A soft rhythmic scrape, like waves pulling sand. There's no rush, no more scrolls to decode, no fires to tend. Just the slow, fragrant calm of a life briefly lived inside another time. Your muscles soften. Your breath evens out. The scents from the market drift farther away. Now just warm impressions in the air. Sweet bean smoke, mulberry jam, burnt clay. They don't need to linger. You've already tucked them into memory, like leaves pressed between pages. You turn your face to the sky, feel the fading warmth on your cheek. Somewhere, a wind chime moves, barely. The breeze is kind. It doesn't try to impress you anymore. It simply is. You let your thoughts stretch like old silk, loose and lazy, unspooling toward nothing. You did enough. You blended enough. You remembered well. Whatever tomorrow brings, new kingdoms, forgotten scrolls, or even duck-based disasters, it can wait. Tonight, you're still. Wrapped in soft air and silence. Let it all blur now. You've earned the sleep that waits beneath.